Hello, everyone. It's Natalina here, and I'm coming live to you on YouTube from Natalina's Kitchen, Italian Cooking School here in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. I've been teaching in my school here since 2011. We've been teaching classic Italian dishes as well as authentic Italian dishes. And I've proudly been taking clients to Italy, mostly Southern Italy, since 2015 for food and wine tours. So we're doing no-knead bread. Italian women have been preparing no-knead bread in their kitchens for centuries, okay? And a fellow by the name of Jim Leahy, spelled L-A-H-E-Y, an American baker, went over to Italy to learn to bake bread. And when he came back to the US, or to North America, because I'm in Canada, he basically simplified the method and made it very popular. There's a lot of recipes online that you can access. So this is actually Jim Leahy's method, but it's my recipe. So you can take the method and you can adapt it. But if you're interested in some of those popular recipes, you can very easily find them online. So first off, I have got 3 cups of all-purpose flour. If you have bread flour is also great. I often make this recipe with bread flour. That's the first thing. So let's put that in my bowl. Second ingredient that I have here is 3/4 cups of wheat bran. Okay, so these are like the wheat bran flakes that you find in the aisle in the grocery store where the cereals are. I think years ago they used to be in the baking section, but it's no longer there. It's where the cereal is. Okay, so that's 3/4 cup of wheat bran. Next, I have a 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast. Okay, so this is called quick rise yeast or instant yeast. Sometimes it'll be labeled as a bread machine yeast. And basically it's the really fine concentrated yeast. Now with a no-knead bread, you only need a small amount because we're going to let this rise for a very long time. Okay, so that's kind of the general rule of thumb. Longer rise, less yeast. I know it sounds like such a tiny bit. Okay, so in that goes. Next is 1 1/4 teaspoons of salt. And this is just regular table salt or sea salt. Okay, you don't need any fancy salts here. It's just a regular grind of salt, 1 1/4 teaspoons. Okay, so that's going in. So these are all our dry ingredients. You can see I've got a spatula here. A wooden spoon would work as well. So I'm just simply going to mix these dry ingredients. Okay, make sure they're all mixed in nicely. The bran is so much darker that you can tell when it's all mixed in. Okay, now you would need to do this approximately 18 to 24 hours before you actually want to serve this bread. So say you're having dinner Saturday night. You could do this Friday evening for dinner Saturday night, and it would still give you plenty of time to get it on the table. Okay, so we've got our dry ingredients all mixed in. Now, to this, all I'm going to add is 2 cups of warm water. Okay, you don't need to worry about taking the temperature or anything. It's just 2 cups pre-measured. It's all going in. Okay, so you can see right now, this is so simple. Everything is just going into the bowl. And I'm just going to mix it up. So now all I'm doing is mixing this up until all the dry flour is totally incorporated and it's wet. It's going to be very wet. The very first time I made this dough, I was used to conventional bread recipes that you knead, which are a lot drier than this. And I thought, how can this be? It doesn't seem right. It seems way too wet. Well, I'm telling you, it is. It's going to be extremely wet. If you want, you could always get rid of the spatula and just get your hand in there. Okay, so like I said, this is what you're going to do anywhere from 12 to 24 hours ahead, okay? And then you won't have to touch it during that rising time, okay? Just to give you an idea, I did this last night at about 8 p.m. in order to have this dough ready here that I'm going to show you. So now this one that we just mixed, I'm covering it with plastic wrap. I'm going to leave it at room temperature. I usually throw a tea towel on top, so let's do that. Okay, and now I'm going to tuck this away. I'm going to tuck this away for at least 12 hours, preferably 18. Okay, so anywhere between 12 and 18 hours at room temperature, and that's it. Just leave it and forget it now. So I did this one last night. Can you guys see, like if I move it, you can see how wet it is? That is how wet this is. Okay, so it's super wet. So after the 12 to 18 hours, you're going to punch it down. I mean, I don't need to punch it because I was handling it there. Okay, so that's what you're going to have. Again, it is extremely wet. It looks almost like a wet oatmeal. What you need to do next is you need a well-floured surface. It could be a table, it could be a cutting board, it could be your countertop, as you wish. I really like to use a silicone mat if you have one, or even a piece of parchment paper. And then what you're going to do is you're going to generously flour that. Okay, so, and because it's so wet, you really do need to generously flour that. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take this beautiful wet mass of dough and you're going to drop it on your floured surface. And what you're going to do now, it seems unusual, but you have to trust me. We're going to fold it amongst itself. And what that means is you're literally going to pick up a piece, and it might stick a bit if you don't have enough flour, and you're going to fold it. So I've taken the two sides and I've folded it. Now I'm taking this side, I'm folding it, and I'm folding it. And that is all for now. So now we're going to generously flour that again. And the reason we do that is it's been sitting that whole time. We want to start activating the gluten. We want to start moving it around. It's been resting that whole time. Okay. And now I'm going to put plastic wrap on it. And I'm going to let this rest for 15 minutes. Okay, so let's talk about vessels. Typically, no-knead bread is baked in a cast iron pot, okay? Now, I know not everyone's going to have a cast iron pot, so let's talk about that. So it's about this size, the one that I like to use for this recipe. You can do round, oval, as you wish, and it's basically an enameled cast iron pot. Basically, what happens is this gets so hot. It's kind of the closest thing to having your bread in a wood-fired oven. When it's ready to go in the oven, which is still not for some time, and I will reiterate this again, is we need to heat this pot in the oven. So the pot goes into a cold oven, and we preheat the oven to 450 degrees with the pot in it. Okay, it's going to take longer than normal for your oven to heat up. And the reason is the oven's going to beep when not only the oven is 450 degrees Fahrenheit, but anything in the oven, including the pot, okay? So that's why we use cast iron, because it gets good and hot and it really retains the heat well. So if you have a cast iron pot, and a lot of the times clients will ask me about the lids, typically if there is any other material on here, it's also oven safe as well. The only thing is, of course, when you heat this in the oven, it's gonna be extremely hot, and I recommend silicone gloves to handle that when it gets really hot. Okay, so if you have one of these, fantastic. That's about a 3 or 4 liter size. Okay, just to put it in perspective. Now, if you don't have a cast iron pot, a couple of things I think you could use. Number one is a cast iron frying pan. Okay, it might spill over the sides depending on what size you have. So I would recommend, if you have this standard size, which is about 12 inches across, then I would suggest when it's time to bake the bread to split it in half and use 2 pans. If you have 2 pans, or bake one, it might take about 20, 25 minutes, and then bake the second one. You can just leave the other piece of dough covered until you come out, okay? The last thing I thought that would work really well is a roasting pan. I think most people have an enameled steel roasting pan. So just your turkey or roast beef roaster, okay, with the lid. This here would work really well because the whole thing can go in the oven. It's not going to withhold heat as well as cast iron, but it does really conduct heat very well. And so I think this would be a really good alternative if you don't have one of the heavy cast iron pots, okay? One thing I might recommend though is when this goes in the oven with the lid on, because the lid is not super tight, what you could do is you could get some heat-proof string, so kind of like a twine, and put it through here and just tie it tightly. So it keeps the lid on really snug and tight so all the heat stays in there, okay? So just taking a step back, we took our dough out after 18 to 24 hours. We did the folds among themselves and we let it rest for 15 minutes, okay? Now, what we need to do now is we need to shape the dough, okay? So because it's a sticky dough, you're gonna need lots of flour. So if any of the flour is absorbed, I want you to add a little bit more, okay? And then there's a couple ways you can do this. The easiest way for a beginner is just to basically imagine it's a package and just bring it all together like that, and then flip it over, okay? And I'm gonna show you how to do that in a minute. Or what you can do is you can put flour on your hands and actually pick up the dough. Okay, it's going to be a little bit challenging though because it's very wet. Okay, so like I said, it's a little challenging to pick this up because it is so wet. So what you could do is just kind of roll it around in the flour. And then what you want to do is you want to have another tea towel or another silicone mat or another piece of parchment ready to flip it onto. Laura's going to get that ready for me. She's going to put it right in front. You can, you know, it's almost like making like a little dumpling. Or imagine if you had a tea towel and you were gathering it all up. Okay. So then what you're going to do is you're going to pick it up and you're just going to flip it over. So you want that little gathered up bit on the bottom. Okay. So now we've made it into a round. We're going to add more flour on top. And now that piece of plastic wrap. Okay. So now you're going to let this sit. So we have our long rise in the bowl. That's your first proofing, your first rise. Then we had a 15-minute rest. Now we've made it into a circle. We've flipped it over, more flour, and now it has to double in size. Up to 2 hours that can take. And again, that is at room temperature. So the 12 to 18 hours for the long first rise, you can just leave it and forget it. Then the next day, there's a little bit of things that you need to do and you need to kind of organize it based on your day, okay? So it only takes a few minutes each time to kind of manage the dough, and you can see. So now up to 2 hours. In a class, I've even shortened that to an hour and a half if we need to really get moving, and that has worked fine. As I described to you, whatever vessel you're going to use, about a half hour before this is ready to put in the oven. So let's say you got a lot of time on your hands and you're going to let it rise for 2 hours. What I would do is set a timer now for 1.5 hours. At the 1.5 hour mark, what you're going to do is you're going to put your pan in the oven, the cold oven. You're going to set it to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? And it could take up to a half hour for it to heat up. That's why you want to do that a half hour before, okay? Your pot has been heated in the oven. You've taken it out safely with silicone gloves. You've taken the lid off, okay? We've got our dough that's risen up to the edge. Pop it into the pan. Carefully remove the silicone mat. With your oven mitts on, you're going to carefully give this a shake to move it because it might be stuck on the sides, and you're going to carefully put the lid back on and into the oven that is now preheated to 450 degrees. Okay, so you're going to put that in the oven in the middle rack at 450 degrees for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you're going to carefully pull out your rack. You're going to carefully remove the lid of your pot. You're going to put it back in the oven on the on the middle rack for a further 15 minutes at the same temperature, 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, after it's gone in on the middle rack for a further 15 minutes, then you're going to go in with your thermometer and you're going to check at the thickest part, and it needs to be an internal temperature of 208 degrees Fahrenheit or hotter, okay? Once it has reached that temperature, you're going to carefully remove it. Normally, it does not stick in the pot. It usually pulls away. You could also put parchment in your pot if you like before you add the raw dough, okay? But when it comes out of the oven, usually I can just give it a shake and then turn it over and it'll come out. And then we will put it on a cooling rack like we did here to cool off. You should always cool bread on a cooling rack so that air can circulate around it, okay? If you don't have a cooling rack, just prop it up on a couple of things so that air can circulate around it. So this is the bread that we did. Can you guys hear that? How crunchy it is? Okay. See how nice and crunchy it is. Now, when you bake bread, a lot of the traditional recipes will tell you to tap the bottom and it should be hollow. I really love this tip that I learned in culinary school, and that is when it's in the oven, if you check the internal temperature, it should be 208 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, and that'll tell you that the middle is cooked, okay? So when you pull out the thermometer, it should not be sticky, okay? And this went up to 208.5. Oh, 208.5. There you go. So, so it was cooked. Now, you want to let this cool off on a rack, fully cool off before you cut into it, okay? You can hear it nice and crunchy. It is. So it might be a little bit wet, but there you go. There's our no-knead bread. And you can see with the bran, it's almost like a cracked wheat, and you can see the air holes in it because it's a nice light bread. Still quite hot though. It should have really cooled off more, but I wanted to show you the inside. So that's it for now. From Natalina's Kitchen, coming from Guelph, Ontario, Canada. Please subscribe to our channel. If you enjoy these videos, please share them as well. Stay safe, stay well, and if you're looking for more recipes, check out the online school at nataliinaskitchen.com. And if you have any questions about these recipes or any of those recipes, please reach out through email or social media. Okay, thank you, and ciao for now.